Welcome to Season 2 of Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al, the podcast that brings you timely and practical stories straight from the paddock. From sowing to shearing, fire to flood, and everything in between. We're here when it matters most. Each episode taps into real experiences, expert voices, and grounded advice that helps you stay ahead on farm. I'm Alister from the Gippsland Ag Group, a grassroots farmer-led network in Gippsland, focusing on soil, grain and fodder, pasture and livestock. We're here to support producers in building resilient and profitable enterprises across our region. So let's dig in. Welcome everyone to Digging Deeper. I have a special guest in Justin Dunn here. How are you, Justin?
Yeah, good, thanks, Alister.
Now, you're a long way from home, Justin. Just quickly explain where you've come from last night.
Yeah, so just came in up over Hotham on the first time driver over the, what do they call it, the Great Alpine Highway. Fairly terrifying in spots. It was quite snowy and icy on the top of the hill, and anyway, found my way down there last night, and very glad to get to the bottom.
So where's home for you, Justin?
Yeah, so come out of the southwest slopes there at Temora, about an hour north of Wagga Wagga.
Now, the reason that you're actually the founder and owner of Shepherd Ag Auto Feeders. We've got one of your systems here. So we're going to talk a bit about that, but we'll go back a little bit before then. You're a teacher now. If my research is correct, were you a principal of a school at one stage?
Yeah. Just digging back, I did years ago. Did an ag degree, actually at Dookie in Victoria. Right on the end of that, I went and attached a diploma of education onto that, and so for a lot of years I didn't really do too much with the ag degree so much, and went into the education system. I was an ag teacher and science teacher for a number of years, and progressed to be a principal at a small country town at Area Park, and sort of really did get into that job, and I really had a passion for science and technology, and we used to run these STEM centres at lunchtime for the kids to come in, and they could basically guide their own learning and donate their own time to do that. And before we knew it, these spaces were getting overrun. Actually, they had recording studios just like this where they could come in and record their own music, and so a lot of these spaces just became self-driven learning spaces. But I got really involved because there was a lot of farming kids there. Nearly everybody came in on a bus, and so a lot of creative ideas. They used to build drones and these sorts of things. But from there, it really sort of spiked my interest in coding and programming and developing software. Yeah, so it was a really good journey for me and for the students at Area Park.
Yeah, so I'm guessing that was some of the foundations of your learnings for what you've built today in the feeder systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess you've just got to start somewhere, and a good teacher can bring the kids along with you. You don't necessarily need to hold all the knowledge. You just need to know the journey, or to get on the journey and problem solve. And they watch and learn how you do things, and it always starts with the problem, and we've got to overcome that. And so, part of the coding, learning that stuff was quite a difficult one, particularly if you're starting from scratch. But before you knew it, feeding off each other, we'd get up and create some really good projects. Yeah.
Now, while you're teaching, were you running any property on the side, were you, or just around the farming community?
Yeah. So sort of parallel to that academic career, we had a farm on the side, and of course it was relatively falling behind quite rapidly. So one of the things around sheep farming is it requires skilled labour. Not just anybody can feed sheep, particularly to do it right and well. There's very high risk of harming animals if it's done incorrectly, and so. But the price of that labour was nearly too expensive to do, and we're seeing even now a high churn of staff. Staff coming in and out, and so we're trying to build our business even now around a lower capacity worker, and put all of the intelligence into our automated systems that can sort of put the smarts of the best of the farming in there, and allow all of the on the ground manual components to be done by those labour units.
You're farming on the side.
Yep.
And teaching.
Yeah.
What was a catalyst to go, something needs to be done in that feeder space?
Yeah, so, I started looking around for precision automation to be able to, particularly our ground is a harder piece of dirt. And so we needed to feed more regularly than most people. So I needed some precision equipment and automation to be able to deliver an adequate ration to these sheep and for me not to be there. As it turned out, there was really very little in that space. We've got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cropping equipment sitting around. And then when I looked at the sheep space, the most advanced piece of technology I could find was a gravity-fed lick feeder, which really didn't suit the purpose of what we required. We needed a precision machine that could deliver a small quantity of feed over a long trough space, and get them in and out so they could continue grazing. We sort of opted to move away from a lick feeder. We didn't want to use up their saliva or their mouth on a feeder. We wanted to be able to give them a prescribed, supplement of feed, and then for them to head back out into the paddocks and continue to graze effectively, or be able to eat the rougher material.
Yep. So your concept was not so much feedlotting scenario at the start, but just drought feeding or supplement feeding.
Yeah. So
to get through the tough times.
Yeah, it kicked off that way for sure. So that we could carry the numbers of sheep we had through the feed gaps, and the feed gaps were appearing more and more regularly. And so with the precision type automation in the feeders, we can scale up and scale back that feed, and we can ramp the feed up safely without any risk of acidosis in those animals. And hence that's where the word sort of shepherd come from. In Australia we kind of we herd sheep really, and we chase them. In the Middle East the sheep follow them in a way, and they shepherd them. And so the word that sort of shepherd, that this feeder looks after your sheep, when you're not there, and that's kind of where the name sort of spawned from.
Now, version 1, what did version 1 look like? Can you remember how long ago was version 1, and what it would have changed significantly over time?
A lot of years ago. Version 1 to me at the time was fantastic.
Yeah.
Right up till version 2. And then version 1 not so good anymore. Version 2 is the thing, and I think that sort of principle of where you're up to. The versions we're up to now would be, we don't track really the versions, but we're up to version 11.2 in our software, where our hardware versions, we haven't really tracked them from a version perspective, but massive upgrades as we're going along. So I think that progression and growing into the space has been something we've really had to work on. It's as more information comes to hand and the more data you have, then you're able to enact the change on the hardware without getting in and doing it, and running some research and development around that. You sort of can't just get there. One of the biggest things I probably know about myself, and probably other people, it might resonate with other people, is that a lot of what you think you don't. In a way, your instincts let you down sometimes. You could be quite adamant that this will work until you do it, and then once you do it, then you think, it actually didn't pan out the way I thought, and these were the things I've observed, and so these are the changes that need to be made.
So what is one of the more significant changes you've made from version 1 to, software version 11-ish now?
Yeah.
What's one of the biggest changes you've made, or concepts you've changed?
There's been I wouldn't say the biggest, but we did a lot of work initially on our automated induction software that went in there, and this software is quite intuitive, so it can read what the sheep are consuming and be able to scale forward and scale back based on their consumption. But the concept is that we, over a 7 to 10 day, in some cases 14 days. It'll ramp the sheep up onto grain safely, and we call it our safe start. So it'll bring them up onto a full ration of grain without ever getting close to acidosis or compromising their digestive system. And so that's been a really big development. If sheep happen to go off feed for a day, the machine can rate back with them. And I guess the concept of providing small but regular bursts of feed through any particular day doesn't allow any one feed to give them a high enough level of grain that could cause any type of intestinal lining burn.
Yeah, so differences, because there are a few systems out there now, automatic feed systems. What's the main differences between your systems and some of the other competitors, I guess?
Look, I mean, the technology around the augers and scentless augers and the PVC, this is nothing new. It's been around in chicken farms and pig farms and all of that.
Because just anecdotally looking at them, there's hardly any difference at all, really, is there?
No, absolutely. Yeah. That I guess where when I was younger, I worked in dairy farms, and this is where I picked up on that, and it's quite generic for a lot of feeding industries. Where we've had to hone in is in specifically designing it to be specific to sheep, and putting the intelligence in the feeder. Our feeders are computer based. They run off a PLC controller. We punch in how many sheep are in the pen, for example, how much grain we want to feed them, when and how often, and then the computer will actually then deliver that system over and over and over. And it has, the auto induction program. It has a Containment component to the software. It has the full feed ad lib controller in there, and also has what we call our preset windows, so you can set block times through the day for the feeder to come on and off. But underlying it, we also have anti-gorge protection built in. And a good example of how that works, for example, it only lets sheep eat 25% more than what they had the previous day. And what we see sometimes, for example, if a weather event or the barometric weather, the pressure drops, sheep will go off feed. And then when it clears up, they'll hook in and play catch up, and this is where you get gorging, and often you might lose one or two. In this particular case, when the feeder senses the gorging process, the feeder will stop, and then it will start again the next day, and then continue to ramp sheep up until they're back up onto their higher levels of grain. And that's just a standard feature. The feeder also controls the water trough as well, so it flushes it regularly. So water and feed are hand in hand. You can't just worry about one and not the other. And so absolutely. The feeder, you can set the feeder to control your trough to flush it once, twice, 3 times a day, depending on your water quality.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the other stuff you've got. Could you just mention one there, an automatic flushing trough, low volume, and flushes out, what is it, about 4 times a day?
Well, it depends on the time of year, I guess, the design of your pens, and how fouled the water is getting, how quickly. But I guess some principles that we work on with the water troughs is, in all honesty, the best place to keep your water is in the pipeline. Don't put it in the trough. But when it's out there, we want to be able to put a long enough skinny frontage there, but not a lot of volume. We want to continue to flush that regularly, so small volume being turned over and replaced regularly. The more sheep drinking out of a smaller volume also means the water temperature remains cooler with the inflowing water coming in.
Now, your troughs are concrete too, is that by design? Or
so we have the concrete troughs, and now we have a new release trough, which is an aluminium trough that, once again, my instincts would have told me that the aluminium trough, actually that the water would be hotter in a metal trough, and it's absolutely not. So it all comes down to the temperature of the water coming in. In a concrete trough, the water will lift to the concrete level because the concrete absorbs and holds more heat, whereas in the aluminium trough, it
not as much thermal mass, I guess.
There's no thermal mass there, and so the temperature of the metal actually rapidly drops. And so because we've got this constant turnover of cooler water coming through, the water's staying consistently colder all the way through. In a concrete trough, the water level will stay quite warm right through till midnight.
Yeah.
with that. So it was interesting information to come across. When we look, not all metals are the same either. The stainless steel ones actually worked okay, but I really just found out that stainless just stains less. A trough block will eat through it and start to put holes in it if you're using algicides and things like that.
So what other products do you guys produce now? So you've got quite a suite of equipment you can sell to producers?
Yeah, so we have an on-farm grain mixing and batching system that also is part of our main automated feedlot system. So that obviously it's a really big deal for farmers to be able to have an automated grain mixing setup. So what this will do, it can mix into a hopper and then deliver it down through your feedlot automatically through centerless augers. It can also, though, when it's finished doing that, flip over to a premix silo and fill it up. So you might have 30 tonnes sitting there ready to fast flow into a chaser bin to take out to other feeders. So that's a really powerful piece of equipment. All our feedlots now are built to be a 13 pen feedlot. Whether you put one feeder on it or 5 or 7, the numbers don't matter. It's very modular, so you can start with the mixing plant and just add on modules as you go with cash flow as it turns up. So the expandable nature of it is really huge. But I think the main elements that we've got in the feedlot would be the mixing plant, obviously the centre fill delivering system through your accumulation bins, the auto feeders that we have, and also our weighing and drafting system. So if you can imagine a auto weigher and drafter sitting in every fence line between the pens, what we have there is a salt lick sitting in the front of these drafters. The animal will walk along, sheep will go up into the crate and have a go at the salt lick. And while it's there, its weight's being recorded and averaged and going back through onto your phone app. But if it's above a target weight that you set, a little gate switches over behind them and they back off the weigh plate into the next pen.
New mates.
Yeah, mates, that's right. But it's all being done very passively, stress-free, more importantly, 24 hours a day autonomously. We're not for example, when an agent rings and says, look, we've got a really good grid opened up with this abattoir, first thing most blokes will say is we need to go and draft up all the sheep.
Yeah, pull them out.
Pull them out. Let's go and find out how many we've got and we can book them in. Well, in our particular case, we know that we at least have 80% of them because our weights in our pens may not be exact to the grids, but what we do know is these are the weights that are in those pens. The reason they're there is they've been drafted into them, and so we can pull them out. We can book them straight away. And look, it's just that stressless environment. The animals are not being worked with dogs. They're not going through handlers and drafters and people and injuries.
Well, I had a lady called Jess Ravel on, and she said up to 10 days weights can be affected by a simple weighing, pulling animals out and putting them back in. So
absolutely, yeah,
big gains there.
We learned a lot with the drafters. Initially, that's not where it came from. Initially, it was about we wanted to be able to identify the shy feeder, and we also wanted to look at separating animals from a bullying perspective, and stress was our focus. We found that we couldn't do anything with the shy feeder. Shy feeder's just shy. You just can't do much with it, but we knew we could take the bully away. So the idea that the bully uses the cradle first, they go in there, they get weighed, and they'll get snapped off. And to be honest, I don't see not many big sheep are shy. It'd be a real rarity for that to happen. So you're really getting 99.9% of those sheep that are physically big are physically able to bully. Yeah, and so we've also found that, which is another piece of, I guess, research digging in, that the square metre rate or standard sheep unit is not so standard. We're finding that smaller animals in that 35 to 45 weight band need more square meterage. Those lambs that are in that 55, say, to 65 weight band need half the square metre rate.
They're more comfortable being pushed around with each other.
Absolutely. The older they get, the more comfortable in the feedlot. They know how to get the water, how to get the feed. You don't see big sheep running around hammering each other. They all sort of have a respect by the time they get to that age. And so a lot of that behaviour is settled out of them. And so they will comfortably go forward and drive weight on, right down into the 2 and 3 square metre rate.
Yeah. So let's talk some more numbers then. Your feeders are 25 metres long?
Oh, well, we make them really a number of lengths.
Right.
However, the predominant feedlot feeder is a 24 metre. And there's a couple of reasons for that, really. We really, you're looking at critical numbers at the point where, it can be really efficient. We sort of find, an induction is efficient around that 250 mark, and a 24 metre will do that. We also find that, we can put 400 sheep on that same 24 metre, and that offers them what we work on a 2-to-1 ratio. If there's one on the trough, there's one waiting. But when you're production feeding, waiting for one sheep to finish feeding isn't a long period, to wait. And so what we start seeing is this social interaction and social grazing pattern that gets back into the feedlot, where they'll sit down and cut through the day. They'll feed together in the morning. They'll feed again in the afternoon, in the evenings. But they'll most of the time will be sort of sitting down socially. We're not seeing this long cascade of waiting to get fed and coming and going from a small trough space. In saying that, though, those feeders will still feed, upwards of 800 sheep if you put, the spaces required around them.
Now, is that with full ad lib feedlots,
that's full ad lib at the time? Yeah.
And what about if you're doing sort of a restricted ration drought feeding sort of scenario?
Yeah, head space is key. So what has really popped up for us in looking at the bird's eye view and the line of sight we need in our farming operation is we've definitely tailored our maternal spaces a lot different to our lamb finishing. So once upon a time we would put dry ewes and join ewes in our feedlot, but that doesn't happen anymore. We have
Why
dedicated.
is that, Justin?
Well, we've found actually a production lift, and I don't really want to quote the numbers on it, but with joining in containment, we're finding we're getting a tighter conception rate and a higher conception rate. We can also use less rams, but also lambing them down in those same confinement spaces. So we've been working recently. When I say confinement spaces, I'm talking 5 hectares for 500 sheep, 500 ewes. And
how many feeders?
1 50-metre feeder.
One, yep.
Yeah, so what we'll do, and we'll only feed up to probably a kilo in that space. So, a ewe will typically go in there to lamb, 3 to 4 weeks before she lambs, which will ramp her back up onto grain. She's already been seeing grain at some level. We'll feed them around about that 400 to 500 grams. When the first lamb hits the ground, we lift it to around 600 grams. And then probably a week later, as more lambs hit the ground, we'll ramp it up to 800. Depending on their condition at the time, it may go to a kilo or it'll sit on about 800 grams per animal. At the moment, that's about $1.40 or $1.50 a week to keep that ewe in confinement. But we've really worked and focused on early weaning. So we're talking lambs that are 15 to 20 kilos. We strip them away. We don't actually. We take the ewes out of that confinement space and we leave those lambs there. So you're only talking, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and those lambs. Some of those lambs are getting weaned.
Yeah, right. Just quickly, what breed do you normally run up there, or is it?
Well, at the moment we're running, probably around a 5th sort of generation of sheepmaster.
Yep.
In there. We would like to think we could aim at the 3 lambs every 2 years, and you can do that with them, but in our particular case, sometimes we've got to make sure our ewe condition's right, and it could stretch out to 9 or 10 months. But definitely, if I was to say, over 3 years, we're definitely getting 4 lambs.
Yeah. Now, where are those ewes going after you've weaned them off?
Yeah, so those ewes, we've got another property, which is it's more of a hill grazing block. They'll head back over there. There'll be 50-metre auto feeders there, but in full paddocks spaces, and they might still be getting 100 to 200 grams a day. that'll punch out of those feeders, but they've got far bigger spaces to get around in. We freshen them up, and then when we see that they're conditioned, and so that feeder is designed there to get them back into joining condition.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, because they're weaned so early, they don't lose that condition. They're kind of ready to go, and they'll come back in and we'll join them. And
yep. Do you have any mastitis issues pulling them off when they're sort of peak lactation?
Look, I can't say that we're totally immune to that. It's not something we actually treat. You might see the odd case, but it's not like anything that's rampant.
Not concerning
across the board. No.
Now I'm interested about the actual 5 hectare lambing pens.
Yeah.
What design sort of features do you have in there so ewes can actually lamb down and then mother up okay?
Yeah. So because you're ramping the feed up to a fairly high level, there still is in those spaces, and particularly at our place anyway, it's not scalded off full dirt. I think the big things that sheep really need in containment is obviously the nutrition that's in there, but a relatively clean space to lamb them and some privacy to be able to get their imprinting going on and those sorts of things. But in those 5 hectare blocks, there's no getting out of range of your baby. The lamb starts hanging out around the feeder. They start, monkey see, monkey do. They're having a bit of a crack at the feeder too.
Probably stealing milk off others too, are they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a milk bar when mums are all got their head in the bucket. They're any lamb can really get a go. But it's probably not as cut and dry as all of that. But we're definitely categorically say lambing and containment for us has lifted our live lambs marked from scanning to marking, and I think it's got a much higher level of husbandry around them. Their nutrition's being managed and higher, so there's far less mismothering if the ewes walking their lambs off looking for food. And they're just the physical space for them to get away from their lamb. They're reconnecting with their lamb. If they do start that behaviour, they can reconnect pretty quickly. But also that lamb that isn't getting enough feed will pinch some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, where are those lambs going? Are they staying in feedlots, or have you got some winter crops or summer crops that they're going out and finishing or starting?
Because of this cycle we're in, we can never guarantee when you're lambing that you're going to have your lambing into feed. So
well, ideally then, what do you?
Yeah, we do sow some cereal crops that is just, and we leave them sitting there unharvested. Sometimes they might be sitting there February, for example, if that's when the lambs are going to be about, that we'll be whacking them sheep in there. Our biggest probably gap is that 20 kilo to feedlot entry weight, so that 20 to 30 kilos. So usually they'll be heading into an oat crop to try and lift them to that before they actually hit the feedlot. And that 30 kilos is quite a small weight for a feedlot entry lamb. But what we've found is it's very, very important to have in that first 3 months of those young lambs, and this goes particularly for your replacement ewes, is that you develop basically the rumen that can handle grain. And if you don't develop in the first 3 months, it's not going to just happen later. Once the sheep's finished growing its rumen, it's kind of grown. They don't regrow a new rumen just because you want to grain feed them down the track. So we're deliberately developing these ewes ready for containment principles as a lamb as they go through. So all of our maiden ewes go through the feedlot just like the wethers. It's just they'll get peeled off at joining weight and go off into the joining pens where the wethers obviously are terminal. So they'll head off into the meat, stay in the feedlot and head off into the meat market at that 60, 65 kilos.
Yep. Now, I'm assuming because you're pushing everything else, you're joining young ewes, are you? 8-month-old ewes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes younger in a way. Just depends on where that weight gets to, but definitely in that 8-month area, yeah. Yeah.
When you said with that full ad-lib ration, what about fodder or fibre?
Yeah.
What's yours? Have you played around? I'm assuming you've played around with a bunch of everything.
Heaps of it. We're definitely looking at this 50-metre containment feeder. it's also doubling as a like a drought mitigation type feeder. And so sometimes you just don't have access to hay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've just got to be able to manage a minimum nutrition and keep your feed within the budget. And some people just want to carry through. We like to keep our farm on a production curve, so we'll be definitely not just maintaining but producing. But if you just wanted to maintain, often the budget may not be there for buying lots of hay. But I don't necessarily think you need it that much, as long as you're feeding whole grain. Like in our containment pens, once the sheep are up on grain, we tend to not put hay in there. They're still getting around foraging a little bit what they can get in the paddock, but predominantly they're just getting the grain. There's whole grain has a sort of enough scratch factor to keep rumination moving and these things. We do like to get a bit of fibre or more fibre in there directly around lambing, mostly because we don't want to create any type of difficulty there in terms of constipation and increase the risk of prolapsing. So fibre will help slow that down, but definitely in the feedlot we don't feed it. Like, they get hay for the first 15 days in induction, as they're ramping up, and that's mostly really it works as a buffer.
Yep.
But also sort of keeps them full while the grain's coming up, and then we take it off them, and they don't really miss it. They'll take themselves off grain if you kept putting hay in there, they'll stop eating it at some point.
Yeah. What are any additives or buffers that you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's a few. Your minerals and additives are really important. Really, I think the main components that you want to see in your pellets. Obviously you would like something in there that's going to be able to help with that rumen modification. Obviously, being able to combat acidosis in that sort of process. We find that a lot of our grains are quite high in phosphates, and our high phosphates for your weathers is a problem because it'll lead to urinary calculi. So we need to really lift that calcium ratio up to 2:1. And I think the 2:1 ratio is a good one because we also use that for our ewes as well. So, if you get low calcium, you end up with your milk fever. So we need to try and keep that calcium level up. We tend to not use licks so much, although in the front of the drafters is really the only place that's there. We do put salt out as well. But that definitely sort of in our ewe space, calcium and magnesium, very high. Magnesium in the feedlot's quite good too. It has a sort of a calming effect across them. And then obviously the other more, trace elements, cobalt and selenium, your B12 selenium type injections are good. But I must say we don't probably use that all the time. It really depends on where you are in terms of, your feed and so forth.
Now, you trade a few lambs too, do you still?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And what's some 101s with trading lambs? You said a lot before about setting up that rumen, but do you buy direct off places or out of sale yards? Yeah,
absolutely. So we would never put lambs we bought straight into the feedlot at 30 kilos. They're too little. You're just going to look at higher mortalities. They've still got a milk gut. Mostly, if they're that weight, they're probably just off mum. Probably never seen too much hard feed. If we did buy those, we'd probably lay them over a little bit, get them on some dry hay and start transitioning them from grass across. Start putting a bit of grain in them is in more backgrounding, because the usual induction would be to ramp them straight up from there. We'd typically like to see a lamb north of 38 kilos if we can.
Yeah.
Coming into the feedlot, they're probably a little bit older.
And what sort of induction processes, aside from that grain training or feeding, always vaccinations, anything else you?
Yeah, we've stepped back a little bit on the program there. Once upon a time, all of that would happen on onboarding. We basically roll them into the feedlot pen pretty much straight away with hay, and we don't actually dose or vaccinate any of the or onboard them until the end of induction now.
Right.
I think, pulpy kidney, you'd want to get that injection into them relatively soon, but it's really something that comes on later, and more when you've got higher levels of protein. So, 16% protein is really not considered too high. I don't feel, for the amount of pulpy kidney we get. But I think the message here is about managing stress. These sheep have been they've been brought mustered, sorted, curfewed, run through a sale yard, maybe trucked again. We're talking about sheep here that could be, 4 to 5 days possibly getting managed and knocked around, and they're only little lambs still at the end of the day. And then we might get them. We'll dose them, we'll vaccinate them, probably shear them if we've got all the ducks lined up. And to be honest, they're just about ready to drop dead. So, when you get that high level of stress in a feedlot, this is when you get them susceptible to other types of problems, and they will start to fail. Like some ammonia, for example. Like it's not necessarily contagious in terms of social distancing. It's contagious because of stress. And high stress environments bring this on. So we're really trying to get them comfortable. Once again, not handling them too much. Try and keep things quiet. Don't be in your feedlot, inducting them, running through your feedlot pen, checking them all the time. Just keep them calm and relaxed, and get them back into some sort of cycle. But definitely when they come out though of induction, that's just kind of 2 weeks down the track. We put them back through the drafter, put them in a weight group, and they'll end up in their respective pens.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, because we have a regular once a month vet come on the podcast here, and she was saying definitely no more than 2 treatments per yard in, because the autoimmune system can't handle anything more than that. It just starts failing. So if you add a whole level of stress and everything else that goes on, it makes sense that they just can't use what you're giving them. So
absolutely. So they only hit the scales twice in our feedlot. The traditional scales, so that the ones that are in the yard, so they get it at onboarding, which we call it, at the end of induction. I guess that's the point where we consider them a viable feedlot option. If there's any sheep we want to cull from the program, that happens before they onboard. So they'll have the 2 weeks in the feedlot, but if there's anything there, they're sick, lame and lazy, then they've got to go. And then the final time will be the sale cut, but they're up in their heavy weight by then.
Is that onto the truck sort of thing? Or?
Not necessarily onto the truck. It might be the day before.
Mm-hmm.
We put them in a virtual pen based on their EID, and then they'll go into straight onto the truck from there. But it's more about getting that final cut's about making sure we've got the most number of lambs in the top of the grid that we're trying to get them into. That's why we do that particular cut.
Yep. Now you mentioned grid a few times. You always selling direct to abattoirs, are you?
Oh, not really. No. We just market, wherever it's best. Yeah.
Yep. Now, we haven't actually mentioned how many sheep you'd put through your feedlots. You able to talk about some numbers around that? It completely varies. I mean, would I say 100%? Just about. Like everything we have on farm is fed. It's a tricky question because my accountant asks me this all the time, and a lot of the time I really can't tell you exact sort of numbers, But, there's quite a few thousand we'll go through, on a year. On a good year, it could be tens of thousands, I suppose, but really, not that many, But most of the time we're, a few thousand we'll sort of put through. So our focus on our feedlot at the minute with lambs we buy in is mostly around our research and development program. So obviously our time is a little bit tight in terms of managing and running a commercial operation.
Feedlotting operation, along with 2 properties that we're still trying to maintain, plus that feeder business.
Now you mentioned right at the very start about staff as well. What staff do you have on the feeder operations or the feeder design and build, and then what staff do you have running farm operations?
Yeah. So we have we're more of a family-based operation. We have 2 full-time staff that basically work directly under myself. But the extended sort of workforce that starts to grow around our business is a lot more significant. So we have 3 main engineering firms that we have dedicated people, I guess, in a way, attached to that building our equipment. So, I guess I've moved the management of those people into those spaces, and so they have a constant flow. Those people are constantly working on our equipment in terms of sort of a quota, I guess. Our people essentially put the burger together, I guess, and put all the kits together ready for shipping out. And so I think we've got to best place all of our personnel where they're best placed. And my place is not building this equipment. My place is designing and working directly with farmers to get the best outcome. We're not selling you a piece of steel. We're selling you an outcome with your lambs, and where what that looks like, and your productivity there. The feeder itself is kind of irrelevant, and this is what we're trying to do, is help a farm grow. For me to be running an engineering workshop is kind of really not where I need to be. And the same with my people. My people that are working with me need to be tuned right into the sheep business as well, understanding where each component is when they're packing them up and kitting them. So we're not allowed. I guess as a school principal, I learnt quite quickly there that I did not want too many staff. They're complicated, they're circumstantial. What I needed was ability to scale up, scale down. We can do that with independent workshops. We also have everything on CAD, so laser cut and folded. So it enables us to have a greater level of flexibility.
Yep. Now, are these where they're getting built? Is it local to tomorrow? Is it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. We keep everything relatively local.
Was that by design, or?
Kind of by design, but also we can manage our quality assurance a lot better this way too. It's once you have a relationship with those engineers, they get an understanding of what you expect. Yeah, so not so many gaps.
Now, who is your clientele base? You've got Gippsland Research Farm is one of them, obviously.
Yeah.
Who else are you sort of selling these products to?
Look, the biggest core part of the business is the sheep producer, and I don't think these guys call themselves feedlotters. They're producing sheep, whether it be wool or lamb, so to speak. So what they're looking for is the capacity to be able to better finish and value add the article that they're selling. Not, most of our customers are not necessarily trading. I mean, they'll start off just by wanting to do something better with their own sheep and their own farm, and they've kind of got a little closed sort of breeding unit going on. But they do start to trade after time through it when there's vacancies in the feedlot, and once they become fairly familiar with how to operate it, the reliability of using it.
Yeah, it's a bit addictive, the old feeding animals, I reckon. So
yeah, it is. Yeah, it becomes a real challenge too. It's not easy. I think probably the only constant in feedlotting is the variables that are there. So you really need to use all of your smarts when you go to putting them in and make some decisions with them. It's not exactly that simple. Yeah.
A couple more just before we finish is what's next for Shepherd Ag? What's next on the agenda?
So we've just released, as we speak, a bulk feeder. That feeder is I guess another addition to our standard feedlot. So we're calling it our hybrid feedlot system. So you can have our standard.
So hybrid species?
No, it's a hybrid feeder.
Right.
No, we're not looking at multi-species as such, or as in that sort of thing. But the hybrid feeder, essentially, it does less really than our auto feeder. But what it's designed to do is just to take on the finishing phase of lambs in a feedlot. So, the initial stage would be on the auto feeders for induction and precision feeding, where they need maximum headspace, precision control over the feed. When they come into their final stages of production feeding, really what they just need there is open slather access to feed. They don't need as much headspace as what the auto feeder's doing. And so I guess the idea that we're potentially prematurely wearing an auto feeder out, production feeding on them, is something we've looked at, and that these feeders can essentially just go into they just plug into any section of our auto feedlot and can just
deliver grain
into those particular pens. Yeah, with low automation in a way, lower risk of technical issue. The feeder itself is dearer, but the overall impact in the feedlot is cheaper.
Right.
So to feed, one of these 24-metre feeders, we'd put 1,000 sheep on. So on either side of it, it's only a 24-metre section though. So you might get 500 on either side, whereas the auto feeder for more precision timing needs
lower numbers for trough space.
So it just is able for clients to be able to mix and match what best suits them in their environment. So if they're still doing a lot of containment, the auto feeder is still the gold standard though for the feedlot. That's that one. Obviously, our progression, shade systems are probably something that's right on the horizon with doing some work in this particular area.
Yeah, well, I noticed talking before we came in the studio here, it's actually, I don't want to give it away, but something that you've learnt recently that surprised you, and I think we're going to lead into that with this one, are we?
Oh, well, look, what we're looking at is, I think there's a really big standard that we need to set ethically that we provide shade in a feedlot. But I guess the science around it is something we're clearly looking at in terms of what an animal's requirements are. These sheep have evolved outdoors their entire time. There's no broad-brimmed hats going on and all the rest of it. So they're quite well protected from the sun itself. And so I guess what's become evident to us a little bit, and we see a lot of shade systems in feedlots, is that starting to look at not necessarily is shade the most important thing. And I think you see sheep using the shade more in extremities, so extreme cold and extreme heat. But in a lot of areas that don't have that, sheep don't tend to vote with their feet and get under the shade, so in the middle, in those good sort of times that it's not overly hot or cold. But what's probably starting to resonate with us a little bit is sheep are far more exposed on the bottom side than they are on the top side. When they're starting to look at the surface temperature, so when they get around, they've got their face down on the ground, and they'll tend to sit under the shade. But I guess the question is it the shade or is it the surface temperature that's actually the driver?
Because you're mentioning a lot of times you'll see the sheep parked up on hay trying to get off the hot dirt sort of thing, won't you?
Yeah, so they'll be sitting out in the sun and you'll think, oh, those ones must be outcasts or something. But when you start really being analytical about what you're seeing, what are the differences there? They're sitting on something, not necessarily sitting on the ground. I see some feedlots that are quite stony, which you can cause sore feet, but the stones get really hot. And if you've got to sit down on that, it's not that favourable. Yeah, so there's a big lot of big questions around that, and some work to be done in terms of some research. There at the moment, we do have a shade system that we feel is good. We like to see long, skinny shades in the pens. If big square shades tend to landlock lambs a little bit in the middle.
Yep.
And so long, skinny, create a lot of airflow through. And they can get in and out quite easily. Yeah.
Oh, it's been a very interesting for me podcast in here, so appreciate your time. Your phone's been ringing off the hook. I heard it buzzing away.
No,
so
that's just how it goes.
So we're going to have to let you go. You've got a big trip back to tomorrow, so safe travels, and thanks very much for your time in here, Justin.
Thanks very much, Alister.
A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.